How do I get myself in a place of empathy when emotions are high?
Their response is not your responsibility.
How is it possible I've offended this person 10 times in the past month?
I would shoot for the jugular. I was angry and I would say the meanest possible thing I could say.
Conflict can be done really well or really badly.
The stakes are high, emotions are high, right? And we have opposing opinions.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the CYA podcast. This is episode 4. And as you can tell, I am not Pastor Steve. And that's because Steve and Jess just had their baby boy. And we're really, really excited for them. And so today we're going to continue the conversation. Right now we've been in a series about having crucial conversations, what that looks like, especially during conflict. And so this past Thursday, we had Pastor Talia share a message and it was incredible. We had so many questions after the message that we want to continue the conversation and address them here. So I'm really excited to be here with you guys and just hear all the wisdom that's going to come out of this conversation. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ashley and Pastor Talia. Guys, why don't you introduce yourself really quick?
So my name is Talia and I've been on staff here at Crossroads for 18 years. I've been married to my husband, Ricky, for 20 years, and I have 3 children, ages 18, 17, and 14.
My name's Ashley. I get to work here as the Spanish ministry coordinator. I have 4 months under my belt, but it's been the best 4 months of my life so far. I've learned so much here. But we got to step into sermon prep with Talia. Daisy and I got to sit in. And sermon prep is something we get to do here at Crossroads where we look at a sermon and we get to prep it before with the speaker and just kind of ask all of the questions and see what God's teaching through it. So with this sermon, of course, we had so many questions. We just wanted to keep going. And I told Talia, even if your sermon's 4 hours long, I will sit there. I have so many questions. So we decided, let's keep talking about it. There's so many questions that everyone else is going to have too. Yeah. So with that, one of my first questions as we were sitting through it, I think empathy is such a beautiful thing and it's a gift from God. And I really would love to understand it in a wider context. What exactly does empathy look like, especially in a conversation and in a crucial conversation nonetheless, when there's conflict? What does that empathy look like?
Yeah, so empathy is so important that we have that when we're having a crucial conversation. You shouldn't have a crucial conversation unless you've done the work of being empathetic and understanding the other person's point of view. I've heard it said before that if you want to see if you actually have empathy, you should be able to argue the other person's point of view in a convincing way.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good point.
So if you can tell somebody, I understand your point of view and I can argue it, then that means you probably are at the right place to start having that conversation. And so the reason you could do that helps you calm your emotions. Pastor Zach was talking about emotions last week and how they can get out of control and then it squashes the conversation, makes it unsafe. Yeah. So when you have empathy, it makes the conversation a safe place and you can talk about the things that actually matter and the other person feels cared for and like you understand them and you're not just coming at them and attacking them. Yeah. So that's what empathy looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
And with that, I'm thinking if you're having a conversation with someone that you might not be the closest to, you might not have that strong of a relationship, but you're still bringing empathy to the table, of course, still trying to step into their shoes and understanding how they saw the conflict or how they saw it pan out. What does that look like also to have a conversation and have that empathy with someone that you're not necessarily close with, but you can tell there's a conversation that needs to happen? How do you go about that at all?
It's a good question.
Yeah, I would say, so I think that you shouldn't have a crucial conversation with somebody unless you've built a relationship with them first. Mm-hmm. So I think crucial conversations, by the nature of it, we've talked about the stakes are high, emotions are high, right? And we have opposing opinions. And so I would try my best to build relationship with that person. And also, if you're going to build empathy or you're going to come to an empathetic place with that person, then you're going to have to ask a lot of questions first. And that instantly builds a relationship. So if somebody offends me, I don't really know them, but they've offended me. And as I talked about in my sermon, if they're a believer, your whole thing is unity, right? That's your goal is unity. So you must be unified with this person. So you would go to them and just say, hey, tell me about yourself, tell me whatever. But you're building the relationship with them. So then if you need to address something where you're saying, you talk to me in a certain way. I'm just curious about that, you know, like, but you'd probably, as you're getting to know them, it might answer some of those questions, why they came across the way that they did.
Yeah.
So I think if you don't really have a relationship with somebody, then I would try doing the work of building that. That's why I say, even when I talked about it in my message, I said, do the work of empathy, which is it takes work, and it's asking questions, it's being curious about that person. As soon as you do that, when you start building that relationship with them, then it's going to be easier to have that conversation. And it might squash. You won't even need to have the conversation because you'll learn something where you're like, oh, that's why they said that the way they did.
Yeah. And I love you're talking about this, covering it, because I think as young adults, having conflict, having crucial conversations, this is the time that we're having them with our friends. Things are feeling more real. We have big conversations to have with our family. And I want to go back on your point on empathy. I think, like you said, empathy is such a beautiful thing, and how it's shown in conflict when we have conversations. But to be totally honest, I feel like sometimes, even for me, how do I get myself in a place of empathy when emotions are high? You're angry, you're frustrated. How do you go from those emotions to a place of empathy? Do you recommend having time apart, then coming back together to have the conversation? Or what does that look like practically?
Yeah, so it depends on the emotions that are coming up, right? So let's say somebody's confronting you and you start crying. You know, sometimes people use that emotion as a way to get out of the conversation. So it doesn't solve anything, right? So I think if you're trying, you can't control what other people are doing, but for you, you can say, I'm aware. I'm very self-aware. I know what the emotions are happening in my body. For example, when I first got married, my husband and I, if we would get in conversation, like an argument, I'm very good with my words, and I'm quick. My brain is quick. And so I would shoot for the jugular. I was angry, and I would say the meanest possible thing I could say that maybe had nothing to do with what we were fighting about. So I had to grow, because I didn't like what that created. It didn't create unity. It didn't help us resolve anything. So I learned that I needed to take a break. I needed to create space. I needed to say, I'm not ready to talk about this right now. I'm not in a place I could talk about this. So let me sleep on it. And what I would do is do work with the Lord. And then I would also do work to say, what am I really angry about, right? Like, what am I actually upset about? And then how do I communicate this in a way, like we talked about, that's kind and that's good and helpful? Because when you think about those things, then you can come back. So if, like me, you're an angry, anger comes up, I would say, and you know, I can't say anything kind when I'm angry. This is not going to be good and helpful. Take space. And say, but don't walk away and leave without saying, hey, I'm going to come back to this. I can't talk about it right now, though. I need space. So you can do that. If you're emotional and you're crying, you can say, it's fine. Give me a minute, and then let me get my emotions out, and then I can, come back to it. But you don't want to use it as an excuse to not have the conversation, but you also want to be just super self-aware to say, I'm just really over, it's just give me a minute, but it's really about self-awareness. And then you can bring your brain down, to out of that place where it's unreasonable.
That's so good. I feel like I've tried practicing that a lot this past year. I feel like God's really been teaching me how to have harder conversations. And something that helps me too is I'll tend to do the same thing. I'll take a day or two and I'll communicate I think I'm up here. Let me come back to normal and then we can talk about it. And something that I've noticed is that I never know what emotion's going to try to come up in the conversation. So I go with notes. And I feel like that sometimes is scary because I'm walking in with a journal. But it's not this is an account of everything, It's just me kind of also putting the facts on paper so that in the moment I don't forget them. Because that used to happen to me a lot where I would get angry or flustered and then I'd be like, well, I don't even know what I'm talking about anymore. Now I'm going in circles. So I think that was something that helped me a lot too with regulating my emotions, is actually having everything that I maybe wanted to share or the facts I wanted to share on paper and knowing okay, I'm coming prepared in case emotion comes up. I can still take my time and read it if I have to.
Yeah, it's a great tool to have. We talked about yesterday about separating facts from the stories that you tell yourself. And so if you do the work, that will help regulate your emotions. But, you always start with, what is our shared intent? Like, so what are we trying to get out of this conversation? And let's be honest, sometimes you're trying to come to different things. So you have to be able to say, that's empathy. I'm going to know, I know what they want and I know what I want. So let's say it's a guy and a girl in a relationship. What we both want is a good relationship. What we both want is to honor each other. So that's my shared intent, because that's at risk right now. So we're going to come back to that. Then you're going to come in with your facts. But you've done the work ahead of time to separate the stories you're telling yourself from the facts. So we talked about this in my examples was, this boss is always late to meetings and makes the person, their employee, late to all these other meetings. So if that person comes in and says, you don't value my time, you don't think I'm important, those are not facts. That's the story you're telling yourself. So what you should say is, instead, the last 5 meetings we've had, you've been 5 minutes late. The story I'm telling myself because of that is that you don't value my time. Can you help me see it from your point of view? Now it's safe. We've separated the facts from the stories, and then it gives them the opportunity to say, well, actually, I don't have a car right now, or whatever the case is. But if I came in hot, shut down the conversation, puts them on the defensive. So it's a great thing if you need to, because you get emotional, write your facts down and then remind yourself you're going to ask them for what their input is. And you don't know the whole story. This is just the story you've told yourself.
Yeah, that's big. That's definitely something I've been more prayerful as I'm entering into a conversation. I'm really praying and asking God, like, don't let me come in with a bias. Don't let me come in with my story. I really want to hear them out. And God will meet you there. He will do the work, which is really cool too. Because there's been times where I'm like, wow, I'm still angry about this. It's been a week. I'm still angry. And I walk into the conversation and I feel like I can genuinely feel God's peace in it. And knowing like, wait, we both want to resolve this. Our fight isn't here between us. It's something else, but we want to come to a resolution together. So I think it's a great way of kind of templating it all out and like understanding what the process should look like.
Remembering the shared goal. I love how you mentioned that, because conflict is inevitable, and conflict can be a good thing and bring people together, learn more about one another, bring you guys closer because you're sharing something that's been heavy on your heart, if done well. And so that's why I've loved everything you've been talking about today and your sermon and the series that we're in, because conflict can be done really well or really badly. And so even to your point of having kind of like a list, or even just journaling out your thoughts, because in the moment when you're feeling all these things, sometimes the stories that you're telling yourself become your reality. And you can't differentiate it until you kind of take a breath, take a step back, pray about it, think about it, really process it. And you can say, well, this and this happened, and because of that, it made me feel this. But if you love the person loves you, maybe it was not their intent, and that's we can come together to resolve that conflict. So that's awesome. With that, when you're going into these conversations, how can you tell, how do you know, and how do you mediate and figure out, will this person take it well if I have this conversation with them? Because that may deter a lot of people away from having crucial conversations.
So when you are having these conversations, it's really, their response is not your responsibility, right? Like, we just have to do whatever the Lord calls us to do. So if we need to have, it's something we need to have unity. So if unity is at stake and I need to have this conversation, and this person they've not been to these sermon series about crucial conversations. So they're not good at handling these kinds of things. It's not your responsibility for their response. Your responsibility is to do the work of empathy, be kind, and make sure that you're going to be good and helpful. The other thing you can do in those conversations is when you see that person feels unsafe, you can kind of step away from the conversation and say, okay, safety has been compromised here. Something made them feel unsafe. You can tell, right? Like, you can tell in a conversation when all of a sudden we're not talking about the thing anymore. We're now throwing accusations at each other, or the person is saying, well, you always, and you're like, we're not even talking about that. That means safety was compromised. And so you can actually stop and say to them, hey, did I say something that made you feel like I was attacking you? And then it kind of stops, puts them back to say, oh yeah, well, you said this and you said I always, and then you could say, I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. You don't always do that. You've done that the last 3 times, but that's not what I meant to say. But you can get back on track. So it's kind of like, the conversation can get back on track.
Yeah.
So I would say you're not responsible for their response. You're just responsible to do the work. And when you do it this way, you'll have a better result because you're empathetic, you're kind, you're being good and helpful. If the emotions start getting out of control, you can control what you can control, which is to say, hey, I've made you feel unsafe. Let's have this table this and have a conversation later. So that's what I would say when you're saying you can't control the other person or how are they going to respond.
Yeah. And I'd love to take this a little bit step further and ask a question of, I love how you said their response is not your responsibility. And to add to that, your responsibility is how you respond.
Yeah.
And so what would you say to the person who would say something like, well, I'm only responding like this with it, whether it's attitude or anger or sass, because they made me feel this way. Like if they didn't want me to act like this, then they shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think we have to take responsibility for our own feelings. So I think you have to say, like, you can't say you made me, right? Because we choose that. So I think that it would be on that person to have that, to own that for themselves. So I think it's really about you can do what you can do. And so if somebody responds to you and says, you made me feel, whatever, you can ask the questions to say, can you tell me how, like you can ask the questions, be curious. It's building the empathy. It's all under that empathy thing if they're doing that. But again, if they say those kinds of things, a lot of times it's because they all of a sudden feel unsafe. This conversation feels unsafe. And so something you can do is say, okay, figure out how did you make them feel or what made them feel unsafe. You can ask questions, be curious. And then also you can always go back to the shared intent. If you both have a shared goal, that is always a game changer in these conversations. Like constantly, we both have this goal and you're not contributing to getting us to that goal. And that kind of can center sometimes. So that you made me feel, well, I wouldn't have if you didn't. If we go back to, we're both fighting for unity, right? Or we both want this relationship to work. So, okay, let's go back to that and say, how do we get there? And how can we get this conversation back on track?
Yeah. With that, I have a question that it's going to go 2 different routes, but I'm wondering, what does it look like when you're having the same crucial conversation over and over again? Whether it's let's say your relationship with your dad, if you had to have that conversation 10 times and there's no changing, when do you know when to draw the boundary? Or when do you know, do we need to take it to someone else? Like, I don't know what this looks like. And also, what if someone's having the same conversation with you constantly and you're probably thinking, how is it possible I've offended this person 10 times in the past month? So those are 2 completely different routes, but how would you juggle both of those?
Yeah, I think it's there's something wrong if the same conversation is happening. So I think that you just have to, again, like, what's on you and what's on them. So if the same person keeps coming back to you and saying, you've offended me, and they come with their facts that you keep doing the same thing, then maybe that's something you got to think through and be like, okay, I keep doing the same thing. Let me figure that out, But sometimes in those situations, this is on them. It's a victim mentality stories. Pastor Steve talked about the stories we tell ourselves, the villain story, the victim story. If somebody is chronically the victim, that's not on you, that's on them. And so you can tell them, this sounds like this is not really about me. This is something you need to figure out. So it's really about them and saying and putting it back on them. This is not on me. If somebody feels left out, chronically feels left out, and you've done everything you can to make them feel included, at some point you're going to have to say, you're feeling that way because you're watching what everybody's doing on social media. Turn off your social media. That's not on me that you're watching what everybody else is doing.
That's good.
So I think you can understand and say, I'm going to empathize with you and say, I get it. It's really hard to watch what is happening with all of these friend groups. That would make me feel left out too. So I would turn off my social media.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But it's really not a you thing. So I think it's very like healthy people can separate what's my thing to own and what's their thing to own.
Yeah.
But you have to do the work of empathy. You have to ask a lot of questions, figure out what the shared intent. And sometimes people will say, this is what I really want. This is the goal. Like, let's do the shared intent. But they really don't have that as the goal.
Yeah.
And that's where the conversation breaks down, where you have to say, actually, you just want me to do a whole lot of work, you know? And I'm not willing to do that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
And something that I love that we got to talk about a little bit in our in sermon prep, you shared the story with your friend Carly. Is that her name? Yeah, I'm
Yes.
saying it correctly, Carly. And you had shared that you had to take those words and talk to God and really ask God, is this something that reflects me? Am I actually doing this? And the same with her, where she went to God too and didn't want to share with you and was scared and had to ask, like, wait, are you sure I need to say this out loud? So I think it's just so cool that having that conversation with God, you can also bring words and bring those conversations that you're having with other people and kind of challenge them in a way and ask God, hey, this person spoke into my life. Are these words true? Are these areas that I need to change in? Was there another offense that maybe I don't have a part in, that maybe I need to communicate that that's something that they do need to figure out elsewhere? I think it's just so crucial that there's that constant communication with God while you're having that communication.
Yeah.
And that was something that just stood out to me in your sermon, where I had the full chills thinking about stepping into both brains and seeing like, whoa, both of these people talked to God and they both had confirmation that the conversation needed to happen, or that it was truthful.
Yeah.
So I feel like that was so helpful too.
Yeah,
Sorry,
I think
too.
every crucial conversation that you have as believers, you should be praying through and letting the Holy, because if you think about it, if you're both believers, you have the Holy Spirit. So the Holy
he's your
Spirit's going
mediator.
to speak to you while you're talking. So you can be asking in the middle of those emotions, I'm getting emotional. Why am I getting emotional? You know, and I'm like, oh, because I'm offended and I'm defensive. I'm embarrassed. What they're saying is true. That was my experience, was the reason why I was so offended is because what she was saying to me was true.
Yeah.
And so I was just so everything in me was defensive and angry and the whole bit. But then when I go and talk to God about it, to be like, okay, Lord, this is something she brought to me. And he's like, yep, I sent her, you know?
Yeah.
So I'm like, I just got to own all that.
Yeah.
And then I found out later that she was having the same conversation where she was saying, God, I don't want to tell her this thing. This is way too hard. I don't want to tell her. Send somebody else. This is so terrible. And at the end of the day, God asked her, do you love her enough to tell her the truth, even though it's going to be really uncomfortable and she might hate you?
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that she did, because it made me better. But I think the thing is, you have to say, we're both having conversations with the Lord as we're having these crucial conversations. So if we can develop that discipline of saying, during these things, these hard conversations, how do I sit, calm my emotions, and talk to the Lord about it? You know, and I remember in that moment for me, I didn't get the clarity from the Lord that what she was saying was true. I just had asked him, help me calm my anger, because my blood was boiling. I was ticked off. And I just remember thinking, help me not to embarrass myself, you know? And so it was like, just keep your mouth shut, Talia, you know? So I was able to listen, hear her out and not embarrass myself and not be defensive in the middle of that. But it was like, if we acknowledge we have the Holy Spirit in us during crucial conversations, let's tap into that.
Absolutely.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
And even, go ahead.
No, I
Sorry.
was just going to say, and you're completely right about the work. And I know as we're listening, even as I'm listening, as maybe some our viewers are listening to these stories as well, we're all thinking about the conflict we've been through, maybe some friendships we need to have a conversation with. And we're all remembering, because it's very personal. Conflict is very personal to all of us, because we've all gone through these kinds of things. And just as a reminder, Romans 8:28, I love this verse. This is my life verse, that God uses everything for good for those who love them and are called according to his will. So it's like, yes, these conversations can be scary. Like how you mentioned, how your friend was like, oh, I don't know, I should have this. And, you know, your response was anger at first. That God still uses that for good, because now you can share this beautiful story of how you were able to navigate that conversation. All of us young adults can learn from that. And I think that is so beautiful. You also talked about offense and how not to get offended when people come to have hard conversations. And I think offense is such a very human, you know, natural thing to feel, but it's very important to regulate it. And I think something for me, how I've tried to be aware when I start to get offended is to remember that the battles that we have here on earth is not flesh and blood, but it's spiritual as well. So if I'm being easily offended, if I'm easily led to anger, if in my offense and anger, I don't want to turn to God and I want to respond, why is that? Why is this beautiful thing of conflict where it's meant to, for us to grow together, causing us to be disunified or divided? That's the word, divided. And so I love how you talked about that. That's so, so important. I want to bring up an aspect of conflict. You know, you mentioned how your friend Carly is a believer, but what in the case if your friend or whoever you have conflict with isn't a believer? Does this conversation look any different?
So it's going to look a little bit different because you're not going to appeal to the unity thing, right? Like God doesn't call us to be unified with non-believers, but he does call us to be a witness, right? And to say like, okay, we're going to be kind, we're going to be loving, all of those things, we're going to display the fruit of the Spirit. So these things, empathy, kindness, good and helpful, are going to all be things that you can apply with a non-believer. And then the shared intent is going to be more of like when you're talking about with believers, the shared intent is always unity. And then underneath that is a shared intent relationship. We want to have a successful relationship, or we both want this organization to do well. That's a shared intent. So you're going to go to that shared intent with a non-believer, whatever the thing is you're both trying to come to, you know, then you're going to use that. So those things still apply. These principles work, you know, with a non-believer. If you make people feel safe, if you seek to understand where they're coming from, if you share facts and separate them from your stories that you're telling yourself, you can have these conversations with a non-believer, and it can go the same way. You just can't ever appeal to the, like with a believer, you can say, we are called, we have to work this out because we are called to be unified. That's not going to work with a non-believer. But
and
the principles still
that completely makes sense, even when you think about what's expected of you as a believer, and then maybe the expectations they have in life, because I can't necessarily expect for them to be also like, yeah, let's get together, let's figure this out. They might not want to. So I think it's also having that grace and just knowing, okay, well, this conversation needs to happen. You know, we're going to work it out. And I'm going to show you the way that God showed me how to do it. You might not like it, but I need to share what's happening. But I think it's really important because you'll run into that a lot. I think crucial conversations happen all the time. And that's a question that pops up as we're talking about it, is knowing the time and place. You know, maybe not like you're starting a 5-hour flight and it's like, hey, by the way, you know, like knowing when is the time, does the person have the energy, the emotional energy, the bandwidth, the emotional intelligence? I feel like I would love to tap into your brain a little bit on how to gauge when it's time.
Yeah. So that's a great question. I think, I think about, so I was Pastor Chuck's assistant for a lot of years, 5 years, and people would want to come to him with a conversation, or if I had a crucial conversation I needed to have with him, I would think like, it's not the right time on Sunday morning before he has to go out and preach, right? Like you you have this sense when you have empathy for somebody, when you care about them, you're going to look and you're going to say, right now is not the right time because we're going into, they have to go to work right now, or they have to. So I think it's just, you kind of ask yourself those questions. Like, let's not, you know, sabotage their day because of this. But also sometimes we use that as an excuse to not have the conversation because it's never the right time. So I think you just have to be wise and ask, like, is this because, am I avoiding this, or am I really being wise about it? And it just depends on what it is. If it's a work thing, you know, like you can set a meeting with the person. If it's a relational thing, you know, it's a friendship thing. Hey, let's meet for coffee. I'd love to have a conversation with you. If it's a relational thing, you can say, hey, I would love to have nothing around us, you know, like having this conversation. I just, but don't do we need to talk, you know, and then like next Friday.
Or the text where it's just like, hey, we need to talk, and it's left open.
No, don't do that. That is so not empathetic. That is very rude and not kind. And that will also make people feel unsafe when we talked about creating safety. So I think it's just, you know, being kind. When you're kind and you're empathetic, you're going to choose the right time. And you're going to say, I'm not going to do it right before they have to lead a meeting. I'm not going to do that right before, you know, something really important. I'm going to choose why. Just use wisdom. I feel like people are reasonable. Use wisdom and think through that. But again, the emotional intelligence, not your responsibility. If they're not emotionally intelligent, you just have to go and have the conversation when you feel like you think that's the right time, and then you're using your principles.
Yeah, that's so good. So wise. So as we wrap up, I want our last question to be a little bit of a word of encouragement, maybe for some people who are listening, who are kind of realizing, I'm actually not that good at resolving conflict, maybe having a crucial conversation, or maybe they're kind of figuring out, I want to grow in emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
What would you say to them, and how would you encourage them to grow in emotional intelligence and to have better crucial conversations?
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, so there's so much work that needs to be done around these things. I think if you can identify your unhealthy like conflict style. So like if you just are very self-aware, like if you know I'm passive aggressive, right? Like I just am really good at blocking or, like not responding, ghosting on a text message. Like if you know those things about yourself, if you know I'm prone to anger and I will lash out, that's my conflict style. Or if I'm the one that suppresses everything and just says, it's really not that big of a deal. Like that's, I don't get offended.
Yeah.
But when you know that about yourself, the first step you can take today is just saying, I identify my conflict style. I know what I'm like, and that's going to keep me from having crucial conversations.
Yeah, step one.
So I think it's just saying, what am I naturally going to be prone to? And then I think the next thing is to say, do I love people enough to tell them the truth? Like, I think that's really a great question. I think that's what's helped me over the years. Like I've been working here for 18 years. And I think if you ask people around, hear what they would say, something that is true of me is that I will always speak truth because I love them so much and I want them to get better, and somebody did that for me. They loved me enough to help me get better. And it kills me to think if people are walking around with a key to my success, they know that I can get better, but they're not willing to tell me because it's uncomfortable for them. That just breaks my heart. So I would say like, ask that question, do I love people enough to tell them the truth because it can make them better? And then yourself, are you somebody like, so the third thing would be like, am I somebody that people can speak truth to?
That's big.
So I think that like, if you're saying, am I somebody that somebody can come to, and have I done the work to, like you said, it's natural to be defensive and offended. So you don't get mad at yourself and say, I'm going to never be defensive. You will be. But it's more of the, have I trained my face? Have I trained my heart to say in that moment, I'm just going to take it, and then I will deal with it with God later. But I'm going to just, and when I'm not going to defend, I'm just going to say, thank you. And then I'm going to walk away and do that. So I think those are three things. Become self-aware, discover what your conflict style is. And then, do I love people enough to tell them the truth? And then, am I somebody that people can tell the truth to, and how can I take a step towards being that person? It could even be going around and starting to ask people, but you have to be a safe person, right? You can't go around and ask people for truth and then you lash out at them or you make them pay, So, but those are some ways that people can get better at having crucial conversations.
There's going to be a lot of conversations that are going to be had, I think.
After this episode.
I was telling Daisy, because we just came out of the relationship series and we're in the conversation series. I was like, In-N-Out's going to be empty after Thursdays because everyone's talking in the car. Like everyone's having these hard conversations. But I thank you so much for walking us through what it looks like. I genuinely think it's so extremely helpful to see it laid out, seeing all of these questions panned out and what it looks like, how to walk through it, how to ask God for that wisdom to know, when should it happen? What am I feeling? How do I not let my emotions come up and destroy this conversation right now? So that was I'm going to go home and think about this for a long time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just in this time that we've been together, I've learned so much as well. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thank you, Pastor Talia. Thank you, Ashley, for being here, sharing a little bit more about the message and also just facilitating this conversation. So I hope you guys learned a lot. I hope there are some answered questions to maybe some questions that you guys may have had after the service. And we will see you back with Pastor Steve in episode 5. Take care, you guys.